Hi, Akifa. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Brittany. It's nice to be here. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
It is awesome to have you on the show. I've been following you on Instagram. If anyone's on Instagram, you got to follow this woman. She is the most dynamic person I think I've ever met, most interesting person. And why don't you actually go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? And if you leave out one of those interesting things, I'm going to bring it up because I can't believe how many things you're into. But tell us, our listeners, about who you are.
Okay, absolutely. My name is Akifa Khattak. I'm a healthcare attorney. I have a master's, double master's from Cornell and Hopkins in health administration and also biotechnology, so business law and tech. And I'm the co-founder of Her Health AI, an endometriosis FemTech company. I also wear a few other hats. I'm involved with lobbying with the White House and different women's health advocacy groups with Brittany, along with you, and a lot of different things. We are in the women's health space. And what else can I mention about myself? I'm also part of the Miss Florida competition as well, the pageantry. Yeah, so it's a little bit about
Deep sea diver. I wanted you to add that one in too. Deep
oh,
sea diver.
I love personal things. I love ice hockey and I do stand-up comedy. I played ice hockey my whole life, do stand-up, but do a little bit of free diving and scuba diving. Huge metal fan and reggae fan. And we also have a love for animals, so we connected on that too, Brittany. I know you,
Yes.
so I feel like we should do an intro on you too.
So if you follow Akifa, her Instagram stories are she's playing in ice hockey, then the next day she's deep diving in the sea, and the next day she's in Washington D.C. doing a policy pitch. Like it's absolutely incredible. It's yeah, I'm like, damn, this woman is so interesting. So really excited to have you on the show. But we do have to focus. This isn't just who does Brittany find interesting on Instagram. This is definitely a show about women's health innovation. And so let's dive a little bit more into your tech company that you co-founded, Her Health AI. Why did you start it and what does it do? And maybe actually dive a little bit more into your personal story if you're willing to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a co-founder of Her Health AI with amazing professionals, Dr. Mauricio Brau, who is a world-renowned expert in endometriosis, past GL president, 200 scientific articles under his name, and along with Dr. Marina Andreas, Dr. Cynthia Barbson, and also Data Life. So collectively, we've come up with a software as a medical device for endometriosis. And how this kind of came about was all of us were working on different areas individually, I would say, and it all came together. So on my end, I obviously have my healthcare background. I actually am an endometriosis patient. I had a case that wasn't found in medical history. So I had 3 surgeries in 6 months. They had about 32 specimens. I went all over the country. Some of the best institutions told me, we've never seen your case before and we don't know how to help you. So when that happens, it's a little taxing considering I am in the healthcare industry. It was so difficult for me. Imagine all the other people that don't have access, resources, or know how to navigate the system. Along with what happened is I had a very unique situation. I ended up going for pelvic floor therapy. They did egg preservation because I had not only endometriosis, but a rare gynecological tumor. They weren't sure what it was. So this was all precautionary things. And then afterwards, we went through a number of treatments, and I also went in a chemical menopause. So for 1 year, I know what it feels like at my age to have bone density loss, to have brain fog, and truly feel like you're an elderly woman. When I got better, that's when I approached Dr. Mauricio Brau, who also treated me at the time in Brazil. Why Brazil? Because they arguably had better care with endometriosis, especially with my particular situation, with their expertise. And I'm extremely grateful for that. I approached him and said, hey, look, I think we need a better diagnostic route rather than what's happening. It's 10 years to get diagnosed through surgery. It's very costly, and a lot of women get gaslit because their labs, their images, they all come back normal. So what do you do next? You don't want to go for an exploratory surgery because you think you have something. It came out beautifully because he and his team, Dr. Marina Andreas, they were already researching this and they're world leading experts in this. I'll give credit where credit is due, and absolutely they are innovators. So they were already researching AI and endometriosis, and they were working with a company, Data Life, and we all collectively came together to launch this new AI tool. So for me, on the business scientific side, commercialization, them on the medical, and then Data Life on the engineering side.
Wow, absolutely incredible. And thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your personal story. So many FemTech founders are patient advocates because they themselves experience the problem. And the reason that we at Fem Health Insights are seeing the rise of FemTech is because we're seeing a rise of women in STEM and finance. And these women, like yourself, are saying, this is an unacceptable experience and I'm going to participate in creating a solution. And so you are literally the persona of what femtech is being driven by. My hope is that one day femtech is founded not just by patient advocates, and that we're all knowing about the problems and caring about the problems, and it doesn't have to be because you yourself had menopause in your, were you 20s or 30s when you had to do that menopause year?
20s.
Yep, yep, and to have to go to another country. Any idea why Brazil might be ahead of us? Is it just that specific physician, or are there medical schools like thinking more about women's health than the United States? Do you know any reason why Brazil might be ahead of us?
I can't formally say why, but in my opinion, there were a few things that I noticed. First, there is a lot more awareness around endometriosis, period. Like, I
Wow.
went in a taxi and I said, "Oh, I have endometriosis." And I said it in my little bit of Portuguese that I know, and they knew exactly what I was talking about. Now,
Wow.
you go to providers and they're skeptical about it and things like that. First and foremost, I think that it's very well, their education over there is phenomenal regarding this disease. The second thing is, I think that they are, at least from my experience, you do have a lot of highly specialized professionals working on this and that have been working on this for decades.
Hmm.
So it is almost like a hub, and that's what they do. The other thing I think is that there is a difference in personalized care. So, as a patient, when I went there, I did notice that over there, we talk about comprehensive care, personalized, making sure that everything is working together. We're so big in the United States. We do have Epic, we have all these different kind of EHRs. However, everything is on your own. As a patient, you got to go to each doctor and kind of re-explain everything, even when we are working together, the surgeon with your gyno, with even pelvic floor therapist. So over there, they really collaborated truly, like through and through, from beginning to end with my entire case. I went to go see a nutritionalist, I went to go see a pain doctor, I went to go see the surgeon, my gyno, got all my labs, every single portion. It was not just here's your surgery, by go see your own doctor. The pelvic floor therapist, and they were all communicating. Hey, look, she went and she did this. Now it's on to the next thing. This is what she needs to do next. And it was absolutely amazing. And even in regards to the financial aspect, you would think that going abroad, what will their quality of care be? Granted, I was in a very blessed situation, right? Going to great physicians, but it was on par with the US, in some ways, arguably a little better. I didn't get kicked out right after my surgery. In the US, I think, coming from a professional standpoint as well with the business administration, I understand how hospitals work, right? And so there's a certain amount of surgeries that you're supposed to have per day, and it can affect the business side of all these things. And so you, hey, if you don't need to stay longer, we can make room for another patient, etc. Over there, I stayed the day before, I stayed until I was better after. Also, their prep was different too. Their imaging, their pre-op, it was very thorough, and they have different protocols, different techniques that are, I just went to an endometriosis summit, like a conference recently, and they're starting to adopt these different policies and getting on the same page. I think the US is just very big too, so you have to educate a lot of clinicians and a lot of patients. So there's a lot of differences there.
Wow. That there is a lot of differences. I'm glad I asked that question.
I have thought about it a lot.
So, my current understanding of how we diagnose endometriosis in the United States is that, first of all, you have to suffer for X number of years, go to X number of patients, usually, right? Before they agree to do this exploratory surgery where they look at your abdomen laparoscopically, meaning that they put several holes throughout your abdomen and they look inside with cameras and they look for lesions or endometrial tissue where it's not supposed to be around your body. And my understanding is that 50% of the time it comes out as inconclusive. They're not sure. And so you went through this whole surgery, and at the end of the day, you still don't have an answer. But your company, Her Health AI, is trying to use AI to streamline this process. First, correct anything that I may have said incorrectly, but then also tell us what your solution is. How is it fitting into this model or changing
Yeah.
it?
So typically, it's exactly what you said. We go through a very long process to finally say, hey, you're ready for this surgery and you might have endometriosis.
Mhm.
So not only is it invasive, it's costly, and it takes such a long time to get diagnosed. And endometriosis, to put it in perspective for those that don't know, it's one of the top 10 most painful diseases a person can have. It is
Wow.
excruciating. It feels like a truck's running over your stomach. I was working in the law firm and I had a heating pad every day. I had 1,000 milligram Tylenol almost every day for a long time, and it was terrible for your liver. Nothing was helping me. And then it affects your relationship, your moods, your finances, and your work life balance. You can't function. And it gets so bad to where you have the stabbing cramps, and it's a whole body issue. When your labs come back normal and everything is, hey, first of all, you do have a little bit of medical gaslighting. Everything's normal. You're fine. It's just your period. Now I'll say you get clinicians that are more open to saying, okay, it's endometriosis. They'll first maybe put you on some birth controls, etc. But again, the whole diagnostic process is not streamlined. The issues are that endometriosis is extremely difficult to diagnose because the lesions are sometimes under organs and very deep infiltrated. So you have to figure out even peritoneal on the surface level. To be able to see that through the current imaging, it's very difficult. Sometimes there are different femtech companies now that are trying to help bridge this gap essentially in diagnostics. Some are doing biomarkers, blood, some people are doing imaging, others are doing all types of stuff, molecular, genetics. And I know you have a background, you're a scientist, you're a doctor, you're an author, you're a pioneer of femtech. We can talk about that too and go on, but so there's so many different people working on this. Her Health AI has a comprehensive approach. So we have clinical documentation along with imaging. And so without giving away too much, we take everything to do with the patient from their physical symptoms, their imaging, their lab, all of that, and we put it together in the software and we say, hey, not only do you have endometriosis, but here's an endometriosis mapping of the lesions. And with that, a surgeon can go and use that as a guidelines. Currently, they don't have that. And not only do they not have that, there are not many endometriosis surgeons in the country, period. Like the huge issue is that there are repeat surgeries because unspecialized surgeons are doing this, opening girls up and saying there's nothing there because they don't know what to look for. And sometimes, I'm not going to say it medically correct, but there's not transparent endo, but just very difficult endo to see. And all of this affects the woman. They go for multiple surgeries because of this. And that's a huge frustration for the experts. It's just a lack of care and resources and having access to these clinicians. Along with that, there's also not a set protocol of how to go about diagnosing it and how to do your prep. Now it's coming about a little better, but with our tool, how does it work? The patient says, I'm in a lot of pain. The doctor says, okay, she might have endo. She'll get her blood work, she'll get her imaging. They'll put everything to our system. It works with the EHRs. It works with everything related to the hospitals. A radiologist can use it. It's a point of care with your. It can be used gynecologists, surgeons, whoever has the licensing the product. Once it's in there, we'll say you have endo, and then we'll also give you the mapping. So it affects the diagnostic timeline, it lowers, it improves surgical outcomes, and it also helps related infertility because there's a lot of women with asymptomatic endometriosis that can't get pregnant, and it's because they have endo and they don't want to go for surgery again because they think they have a disease. it streamlines everything. It also streamlines teaching all of these clinicians and all the providers on how to do endometriosis. So that will just give a lot more access to a lot of different hands.
That's amazing. These are some of my favorite types of technology in women's health. So you have physical medical devices to strengthen the pelvic floor by actually strengthening the muscles, or you have what you refer to as these more biotech companies for endo, where they're trying to figure out, can you make a blood test to screen for endometriosis? Can you create a cell biopsy to look at the genetics of your uterine tissue for potential markers of endometriosis? I love the software route because as an investor, and also as a business person, I know that investors can really get behind software, right? The business model makes sense. It's easy to get behind. And so I love this idea of yours is like a software that potentially you could actually integrate maybe these other people's tests and their test results. And so it's not necessarily saying you're the be all end all, but maybe the kind of the conglomerate of it all. Would you say that?
That is hopeful. Thank you for all of that. That's amazing. That is more than what we're hoping to achieve. So if we can be, that would be phenomenal.
I think all femtech companies can conquer the world, so
You know
capable
what?
of anything.
I do agree in some regards because with software, it's not that hard. You have to update it in terms of interoperability with healthcare systems, whether you're dealing with Europe, the US, Brazil, the different markets. So to have something that is easily accessible, that it's at the fingertips of the clinicians, the hospitals are willing to integrate it. It has a low cost as well to adopt. So there's a lot of things that are beneficial for this kind of technology. And I would encourage a lot of medical innovations to take this route if it's feasible. So yes, interoperability, there are some challenges, I will say. Of course, there's regulatory challenges going through the FDA, making sure there's enough data with clinical trials, etc. And also making sure that there's reimbursement. A lot of times hospitals won't adopt a new technology. They're skeptical, especially with machine learning is a whole nother level of skepticism. You have to get these insurance companies on board, and that there are some challenges, but I think if you can overcome them, then ultimately the goal is to help millions of women worldwide. 1 out of 10 women have this disease, and so if we can be a part of that, we would be very grateful because there's amazing technology, amazing clinicians, amazing companies that are all working on this, and we're all here for the same purpose. So
Yeah.
I would say we're better together.
Actually, I'd love to segue into talking about AI. So we've mentioned AI, which stands for artificial intelligence. You just said machine learning, which is a type of artificial intelligence. Can you give us a little bit about telling our listeners, maybe who are slightly familiar, maybe they've used ChatGPT, but they're like, how the heck is this software for endo diagnostic using machine learning? Break that down for us, a little 101.
Yeah, absolutely. So without going too much into our IP,
No, of course, we have a lawyer on as a guest. We get it. But just the fundamentals of what is AI and how could it be used in something like this?
yeah, of course. So artificial intelligence, it is a, I like to break it down to say that it is like the new electricity. It's a novel tool that helps people promote what they're doing essentially. And the reason why I'm so broad about it is because even with the definitions and the regulatory portions of what's happening, there's not great definitions. Things are moving so quickly in this, but it's essentially a technology where you're able to use it to advance your skill sets in whatever you're doing, healthcare, whether it's school, etc., all types, transportation. And so you're able to use deep neural links and neural networks, and all the way that it works is there's different types. I don't want to go too much into it. Sorry, my cat is coming in the picture. There's agentic AI and all kinds of AIs that I can't go too deep in without any NDAs and things like that. But overall, the technology helps innovation. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, and I love the use of AI in different femtech companies. I'll give a few examples. Like MIM Fertility, they were on the podcast like 2 years ago, and what they did was they fed this AI algorithm over 100,000 embryo images, and they told the AI, "Here's the embryo pictures. Here's the ones that went on to create a viable pregnancy, and these did not." And somehow the AI could see and picture and think and see things in the images that even the embryologist with the human eye could not see. And so what the software does for the embryologist is they're looking through the microscope, the software is running and then putting little scores on the embryo saying how likely it is that it's going to go off and actually create a baby. And I love this idea of we have all this data, feed it to a machine, and then use that to coincide with an amazing physician to help them do their job.
Exactly, you nailed it. So we're pretty much training all these models on endometriosis and what to look for and all the different kind of things that come along with it. And you have very sophisticated algorithms that are able to, it's like a master organizer and checklist essentially to get to where you need to go. And so with that type of technology, you're able to streamline different processes and make it easier for the clinicians. Now, with that being said, you have to be careful of PHI, of course. You have to be careful of all of the health data. You have to make sure that the clinical validation is there too, because we cannot just rely on these algorithms. You have to train them. And that's where the medical minds, the scientists come in there to say yes or no and guide how the models are getting trained. You
Totally, yeah.
the mind behind it, of course.
Yeah.
And you also need, when you're updating it, you have to make sure too. But it learned so quickly that it sometimes outdoes humans. And actually, this is a little bit of a different topic, but I did speak to a few people, Harvard Medical School. There's a bioinformatics professor that he actually worked with the first founders of OpenAI, and they were discussing it and they were saying, look, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen once, this is a general thing, not just medical. What's going to happen when AI has more data than the collective human consciousness? How are we going to regulate that? Because as an attorney, I definitely work on lobbying and different things. And so this is something that we have to be cautious of with regulatory, with compliance, using responsible AI, safe AI, and what's going to happen. With that being said, they didn't really have an answer. And I think nobody really does. And if they do, then, kudos because they can see into the future. With that being said, when you're making an innovation, you have to do the good manufacturing practices. You have to make sure that you're complying with all the regulations to have responsible AI.
That's right. Speaking of policy and regulations, I know you're very involved in policy for women's health. Can you tell us about some of the things you're working on in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a part of a few different lobbying coalitions. One is the Early Breast Cancer Coalition with Liz Powell and amazing other women's health advocates. So, we're trying to get through the Find It Early Act. And it's a bipartisan approach to pretty much promote women's health care, early detection of breast cancer, and also women's health technologies, essentially. So that's one. And that is a subcategory of the women's health advocates group, which is the larger umbrella that has many different missions in terms of women's health. One of them that I'm involved with more recently is the reimbursement reform for discrimination as well, because women tend to have lower reimbursed surgeries, lower reimbursed a lot of different things in healthcare, and it costs a lot more. We're actually going to have two Hill days soon where we're going to advocate for that with different Congress people. And along with that, something that I've started to dabble with is trying to get maybe endometriosis on the ADA disability list for work accommodations and FMLA, because I think it's really important. If this disease is as prevalent as diabetes, the research is about 2%, and it has a economic productivity loss, like an actual value of billions of dollars because of it. It definitely should be looked at. It's called the silent epidemic, and it's really sad because if its prevalence is like diabetes, why are we not addressing this if it's so painful? And with going back to some of the things that we talked about, I think with clinical trials, I believe women were only allowed in clinical trials in 1980s. So in
Yeah.
talking about
1993. 1993, even
there,
worse. Yeah.
talking about data and talking about all these different things, we have to train our AI. There's so many different biases that you have to go to. Now I'm getting a little bit deep into those kind of things, but there's biases that you have to make sure that the algorithms they can account for. Age, race, all types of things, whether someone's pregnant, and all kinds of things. That's just with women. So just you can imagine how complex it gets.
Yeah. I actually just gave a talk on AI and women's health last week, and some of the things I brought up to get everyone to understand about how current AIs have not considered women's health is anyone who's had an Apple Watch and then got pregnant will know that in their third trimester, their Apple Watch was telling them, "Why are you so sedentary and eating so much? What's wrong with you? Get up and exercise and eat a salad, will you?" Because they still have no pregnancy setting. So the
Mhm.
people who built that didn't consider it. And then also I was thinking about, let's say there's an AI to predict aging progression. Does it incorporate menopause? Because we know that women age dramatically once they hit menopause, and it's not a steady aging such as like males do. And so once I put those out into context, the people in the audience were like, "Oh my gosh, okay." And the moral of my slide at the time was creating your own algorithms for AI, because the ones that you take off of a shelf or use on or open source may not be considering female health, right? And so you might need to actually create your own in doing so. You sound like a busy woman. I want to ask about the treatment of endometriosis and why is it so important to diagnose it? Because okay, let's say you have endo for your whole life. You mentioned needing like pelvic floor therapy. Was that because a consequence of your endo? I want to understand what are the other outside consequences of endometriosis and therefore why you need to diagnose and treat it earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. So why diagnose it earlier? Simple, first and foremost, it's unbelievably painful. When I mean that you cannot function, get out of bed, you're always with a heating pad, it's absolutely miserable. And it really takes away a person's identity, their confidence, who they are. I was an athlete my entire life. I was not able to even walk to the next room. I was in a relationship at the time, and it definitely took a toll because when someone is ill, regardless of the family member, if you're a caregiver, it can drain a lot of people around you and including yourself when you're not sure what's happening. You also have there's mood things associated. So for example, with endometriosis, there's typically a dominance of estrogen. They correlate that typically with this disease. There's no actual reason, the causation for endometriosis. There's theories. Some of them are genetic, some of them are microbiome, some of them is retrograde menstruation. So there's so many different things because of hormones that we first have to figure out, okay, why do we even how did we get this? And how do millions of women worldwide that have different ages, different backgrounds have this disease, right? From all you can even ask your grandmother and mother, they might have suffered from it, right? So that's the first thing. In terms of treatment, now you can get infertility. So the longer you wait, if you have stage 4 endometriosis, it's potential that you might have to, this is very old school thinking, but need a hysterectomy. And sometimes if it's severe, you do. So the longer you wait, there's an increased risk of infertility, not having children. And a lot of women, you can even look up certain celebrities. You'll be shocked. Dolly Parton, Chrissy Teigen, Halsey, Olivia Culpa, so many women, Tia Mowry, they all have endometriosis. I think Martha Stewart. And then some of these women, you think, oh, they just didn't have kids. They were career women. Maybe they didn't want to say they had endometriosis or they didn't know at the time. And then so infertility is a huge one. The second one is increased risk of cancer. Of course, when you have things that are a condition, a disease, it correlates with your hormones, ovarian cancer, breast cancer, all of these things. You also are getting treated by these kind of therapies that can affect that, but there's an increased risk of cancer as well. And then there's chronic pain, like just genuine chronic pain that some may associate other autoimmune issues with it, like fibromyalgia, or sometimes it's not endometriosis lesions. You take out the lesions and you still have chronic pain. You have to retrain your nervous system. That's why there's pelvic floor therapy. That's why you have other means to do things mechanically. Imagine all of your muscles are tight like this because it's been scarred. You have to almost learn to relax them again. And there's manual ways to do that. They do it through like neurostem, they do it through all types of things. So there's a lot of technologies to retrain your nervous system. And the thing I want to point out with that too is that I was told that this disease is incurable. And although that may stay true till this day, I would like to put it out there and have the opportunity on this platform to say that when clinicians are speaking to patients, although they might have to say that, they should encourage them that the body heals and does wonders. And the reason I'm saying that is because I had a mentality that I'm going to have this forever. And every single pain, I then associated it with endometriosis. I went, oh my gosh, my stomach is hurting. I have endo. Oh my gosh, my back hurts. And I put myself in a attitude that was very much of a patient. And so when my pelvic floor therapist said to me, Akifa, I literally manually checked you and everything. We did all of our stuff. It's been months. You physically, I would not have known you had endo given your structural, how you are inside and everything. And then when my surgeon told me and sat me down and said, Akifa, you do not have endometriosis lesions anymore. We took them out. Although they can come back every couple of years, depending on your hormones and stuff, currently you don't have this disease. That was unbelievably shocking to me. And when I had to process it and then accept it, I thought, oh my gosh, I am healthy. I can literally, it might come back in the future, but currently I am healthy. And I want women to have hope because a lot of times you'll have communities, you'll see all of us talking, and it's great. I use Reddit all the time. There'll be a lot of talk on endometriosis. And it's fantastic to get the women's perspectives because the chemical menopause is heavy. The same thing with all these other things. And the patient ultimately has to deal with it. The doctor goes home, right? And so it's nice to have those chats, but we do have to reinforce that you can heal. Truly, you can heal. You have to make sure maybe it's in remission, you could say it's not cancer. But so these are the things that I want people to know in regards to this disease and the treatment, like I said, increased cancer, infertility, and also chronic pain.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've given me a great additional motivation, like I needed any more to promote diagnostics for endometriosis, because the sooner that you can find out and the more details, what I'm hearing from you is that the more details you know about your body and your current state of dis-ease, you can feel more empowered when your current state is actually low, when you're saying, wow, we've taken care of the lesions, I've done the job of my pelvic floor therapy exercises, and then you can feel empowered to know that you're healing your own body, because our bodies are so powerful, so powerful. And I love technologies that are enabling the body and the mind to know that. So that's a great way to end this interview. Thank you so much, Akifa, for your time today. Absolutely incredible. I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for AI, and I'm rooting for women's health.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And we'll catch up. I know we'll see each other at other events. And thank you for having me.